Hello, my friends. How do you do this evening? Gosh, I must say, I'm actually pretty impressed with the quality of video on this phone here. I guess that would be a good starter to the point of this video, which is, I wanted to talk about technology for a minute. Yeah, it just snowed today, a little bit. We weren't sure how bad it would get, but not much. And tomorrow it's supposed to be freezing rain all night tonight and tomorrow morning, so it'll probably be a nightmare. I'm glad I don't have to drive anywhere. So I've been sitting here today while the snow was falling and kind of being lazy and decided to watch a show. And I watched this, well, we watched a movie the other day that I've seen before, which had me captivated the first time. It's called Hugo, and it was based on a kid's book. It's about this kid. Long story short, he rebuilds an automaton. And I remember at the time, I've always been fascinated with ancient technologies and also more recent technologies within a couple hundred years, let's say. Um, I'd never really looked into how much reality was behind the show. And, this morning I got into, I found this little, I don't know, OPB clip about automatons, which are basically robots that are mechanical beings that either, well, they can walk, might skate, they have entire scenes, Um, some of them write. It's like a person sitting at a table, that looks like a real person, but it's a mechanical uh, person, and you wind them up and they proceed to write something out. And some of them are very complicated. I mean, they're all very complicated, but anyhow, I've always been fascinated with older stuff like the Antikythera mechanism. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but uh, Antikythera is like an island somewhere, I think, in the Pacific. I don't know exactly where it's at, but it's where they found these shipwrecks from these old, I believe, Greek ships that were carrying all this cargo, and they found these statues and all kinds of beautiful vases in the bottom of the ocean. And this was, I think, back in the 1940s. And when they finally, after they'd been down there a while, they found this little device, or at least what was left of it. And it turned out it was a device that not only would help tell time, but it would tell you the phases of the moon, at times of eclipses. It's a very complicated machine for its time, for a couple thousand years ago. And I, I've always been interested in it, because they've rebuilt models of it. And I'm like, how far can you go with that? There's just one device, they believe, the belief is that someone like Archimedes may have built it. And he was fascinated with pumps, and he created a lot of different inventions, but so did a lot of people back then. I mean, there were some real geniuses. And so I guess that's what this video is really about, was just to say holy shit to the geniuses of the past. We've got nothing on them. The machines that were built by watchmakers hundreds and thousands of years ago are so phenomenal in their detail. I mean, they are like, well, if you haven't seen automatons, then just look them up and you'll see. And if you have seen automatons, then you know what I'm talking about. There's one in particular, it's called the Swan, and they used twisted glass rods that are spinning, long ones, like all next to each other, to simulate water. And then they have a swan who cranes his neck. It's all built out of silver. And the gears inside, it cranes its neck and it takes a fish out of the water, or it appears to anyway. Just the most fantastic machine. I mean, it's so beautiful. It's so elegant. I mean, and the nobility, the rich, kings, they would, hire people to create these things for them because they wanted to be entertained and think of them as small jesters, if you will. And they could commission huge groups of people to do these for them, but only a few people really had the skills to actually make them. So they were very special items, and a lot of the history of how they made them was lost, and that kind of sucks. But I think it seems like we tend to ignore some of these old amazing machines. I mean, when people talk about, the combustion engine as being just so fantastic, yes, it is. But the only thing that makes it fantastic is the burning of fossil fuels to ignite it. The sense that the rest of it is just cams and levers and wheels and gears, just like an automaton. But the gas helps to propel it instead of wind it up. And that is fascinating in itself. But I know we've got some crazy technology out there now, with computers and science, but one of these robots, they were able to actually program the letters so they could adjust what they wanted it to say, and it would write different things according to how they programmed it. Think of it as the first programmable computer, and it was 250 years ago. And so, while we think we're ahead of the curve on everything, I just give credit where credit's due. Our ancestors, and it's hard to put it in perspective, just a few hundred years ago they were making these, but also 1,000 years ago, and also 2,000 years ago, and maybe even longer, way back, even perhaps 10,000 years ago. I believe that there was a great cataclysm. I won't go into the details of that on this video, but around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago there was a cataclysm that is the source of, Noah's flood and many other myths that may be based in not a flood, but rather a rising of sea levels, because we're finding all different types of underwater, let's just say that there's a lot of places that went underwater when the oceans last rose, and it's hard to move a city. So they just kind of got inundated, and any type of disaster could have, wiped it out. But I'm really wondering, why more technology isn't found in pyramids, in caves, in hidden tombs, inside these, vast vaults that they find. Why aren't we finding more gears? And I know some people will say, well, everything's suppressed, but I know that, while that's true sometimes, there are a lot of scientists who would just love to prove that there's something, technologically advanced found in these tombs. But you get into the pyramids and you start thinking of them as a machine themselves, and you hear all the stories about them being energy centers, and there's a lot of fascinating history that we will maybe never understand. But I think it gives us kind of the gusto to go ahead to show that we're not the first. We're the first advanced in our own way, if that makes sense. But it doesn't mean that it's better. In fact, we're dependent on very limited resources, so it might not be better at all. I certainly don't think today's world we're better off than our ancestors were, but in a lot of ways we are. So our technology has brought us some good things, and now we've got to figure out how to utilize the best of all the worlds we know. But anyhow, automatons are damn amazing. So it's cold, I'm going to go inside and have a wonderful day. Talk to y'all later.